Hello, this is the Cooperative Experience, global inspiration for local community economic development, better work, and a new economy. My name is Antony McMullen. I am a member and co-founder of Cooperative Bonds, and we are a cooperative of co-op developers. And we work in various ways with co-ops and other member-owned enterprises to either start or redevelop themselves. And you can find us on www.bonds.coop. The information in this presentation isn't legal, financial, or investment advice and should not be regarded as such. So the presentation you're having a look at or having a listen to at the moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we should think about cooperating, what a co-op is, just to either present that to you or refresh your understanding. A little bit about the cooperative entity type, the legal form, that's often of interest to people. A little bit about investment and some examples. And I'm focusing primarily on worker co-ops, but I'm going to include the broader cooperative landscape as part of the presentation. So, why cooperate? Well, good old Jeff Bezos, or Bezos, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. His annual wage is less than 81K, according to his annual report. However, his net worth is over 200 billion, which is really about his ownership stake in Amazon. So the question to ask, I think, is what if workers and consumers and others, community members, had more of a share, more of a real stake in ownership of the enterprises that surround us and serve us and provide us goods and products, goods, services and products. And, this would democratise the economy and better distribute wealth and opportunity, in my opinion. So the purpose of cooperatives is not just economic. It's not just about economic development as an end in itself, but it's a means to something greater. I think it's something around the common good. And inspiration for me is Arizmendi, who formed the Mondragon Cooperative Experience, as it's called. And he wasn't just a dreamer. Mondragon in the Basque region in Europe has 260 employee-owned enterprises, everything from large-scale manufacturing through to supermarkets. And the supermarkets are interesting. They have both worker and consumer ownership. Annual revenues in excess of 20 billion, fourth largest employer in Spain, and the inspiration for the evergreen cooperatives, which I want to talk a little bit about later, earthworker co-ops here in Australia, and this sort of new movement around union co-ops, which I'm going to talk a little bit about as well. Mondragon formed all of these cooperatives in an environment with sort of four legs of the table: education, social services, so extra support for workers and community members, research and development around entrepreneurship, and really how to run businesses, and a bank, a cooperative bank. There's a cooperative bank, cooperative university in the area, and that's when things really took off. Is when they formed a bank. Mondragon was started just. Well, the idea of Mondragon started just post the Spanish Civil War, where Arizmendi was almost lost his life. He was a journalist, and he almost was executed by the Franco regime. Luckily, he was exiled out to the back blocks to Mondragon and formed this wonderful ecosystem of worker cooperatives and other types of member-owned business. So it's well worth having a look at. Look up Mondragon. There's heaps of clips and stuff around that you can check out. So what's a co-op? A cooperative is autonomous. This is the definition, the official definition of cooperatives worldwide. So it should, getting back to it, a cooperative is autonomous. It shouldn't be run by a government or a part of a government program, should be servicing its members, it should be charting its own course. A co-op is an association of persons. Now that's generally flesh and blood people like you and I, or it could be legal persons. So it might be entities are the members, it might be like community organisations, for example, could be the members of a co-op. United voluntarily, so no one should force membership on anyone to meet their common economic, social and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Cooperatives are made up of communities, or really communities form cooperatives. And the two key kinds of communities are communities of interest, so people coming together with a common interest. They might be interested in repairing bikes, so they set up a co-op to do that. It can be quite socially focused, so it could be for unemployed workers and industries with high levels of exploitation. Excluded workers might be just people with a disability. Nunda Cooperative in Queensland is a great example of that. They run cafes and do work for the local council, and the members are people with an intellectual disability that would often find it hard to get a job. The other kind of community is a geographic community. So it might be a town or an area that's down on its luck, essentially, where community needs aren't being met. So, for example, a community might decide to buy out the pub rather than see it shut down. And in fact, where I grew up in Narrandera in Western New South Wales, the little town just next door, Grong, has done just that. They've bought out the pub, and it's about community ownership and people pooling their resources. And sometimes that's registered as a regular co-op, and sometimes other forms of enterprise are used to do that. Co-ops run on core values. They're very values driven. Key ethics and values are around social responsibility. There's a sense of self-responsibility where people are coming together to really not wait for government or for others, but to form enterprises themselves, which often appeals to conservatives. And there's also a deep sense of solidarity and connection between people. And that often appeals to people of a left persuasion. So it's interesting that co-ops often appeal to people from across the political spectrum. Co-ops run on 7 principles: education, concern for the community, member economic participation, you put in to get out, you should be autonomous, as I mentioned before, voluntary and open membership, provided that you are able to meet the obligations of membership that are set by members, democratic member control, 1 member, 1 vote, and cooperation amongst cooperatives, so building a cooperative side or sector or part of the economy. Mondragon has inspired this new movement that's mainly based in the UK at the moment, but the idea is spreading around union co-ops where trade unions are working with communities to form co-ops, and they've added some principles that are based on some of the ideas that and principles that have been implemented in Mondragon. So really, making money is not the focus. It's making money to do good stuff. So capital should be a tool which workers use, not as a means to control them. All decisions should be made at the lowest practical level in the organisation. So that's under the principle of the subsidiarity of capital to labour. Fairness in remuneration. So they've got a ratio that all their union co-ops have a ratio no higher than 12:1 from highest to lowest paid. And they're on about developing other union co-ops. So once their co-ops are healthy, they use some of their surplus to form new co-ops. And there's a great game called Cooperative. Everyone plays together, and wins or loses together, and you win by forming a new co-op. If you're interested in finding a little bit more about a union co-op, there are sort of informal kind of union co-ops in Australia. Red Gum Cleaning Cooperative in Melbourne is an example where everyone's a member of the union. And the relationship can be different to a regular business where there are unions involved or a union involved, in that because it's about working together, the union can provide sort of industrial relations advice on health and safety, a bit like an employer association would, because the workers are the owners. And they also check and balance when things go wrong. So, for example, a union member, if they are in a dispute, can get independent representation from the union. So it's important to think about that, because not all worker co-ops are perfect. Things can go wrong. Human beings are involved. So it's important not to be utopian about these sorts of things. So different types of co-ops that could be owned by consumers. So it might be that run a shop, employee owned, a worker co-op, such as a cleaners co-op, as I've just used that example. Enterprise owned, so it could be like farming businesses, other members. Multi-stakeholder or community owned, for example, a health centre that's owned by community members broadly. They can be organised as primary co-ops, so front-facing businesses, secondary co-ops, where the co-ops can be members of a co-op and they can group buy services and support each other in various ways. And there are also what's called tertiary co-ops or apex organisations that represent and lobby for co-ops in the broader economy. If we're thinking about employee inclusion, there's a bit of a spectrum here where you can have, on one side, the spectrum would be where you've got, a union agreement with employees at a regular business. You might have board representation, which happens a lot in Europe, places like Germany, through to maybe an employee-owned company where there's broad-based share ownership and workers have a bit more of a say, through to a worker co-op where it's one member, one vote. The board is made up mainly of worker representatives that are elected by the members, the worker members. And there can be a partnership with the union, as I've mentioned before as well. That's something that is happening or being developed currently. So the two types of worker-producer kind of co-ops are, firstly, the producer-owned co-ops. So the cooperative can work as an interface. Self-employed individual producers, they might be farmers, artisans or freelancers that come together. They're self-employed in a way, or they're business entities, but they work together as a cooperative in a coordinated fashion. And cooperative bonds itself is structured in this way. So that can provide membership and participation, common infrastructure, mutual support, and a collective ability to contract with external parties. Employee-owned cooperatives or worker co-ops. Worker members are directly employed by the cooperative. They get a pay slip, super, all those sorts of things. Provides regular direct employment and full participation in decision-making. So how do cooperatives work as an entity? Well, before we kind of get into that, why should you set a co-op up as a legal entity? Well, I think it's worth checking out the work of Eleanor Ostrom, who talked about managing a commons. And in a way, a cooperative is a commonly owned enterprise. And she did a lot of analysis of commonly owned resources, like fishing rights, things like that. And she came up with some principles, including for this to work, you need to define clear group boundaries. You need to ensure that the people coming together make their own rules and can modify them so that it's clear, the structure, and people can change that structure to suit them. And sort of the point here, when things go wrong, that members have a system for monitoring member involvement and behaviour. So if things go wrong, people are people, that can be addressed. Anyway, again, it's something worth having a look at. I'm not an expert on Eleanor Ostrom, but those 8 principles, which I won't go through in full, are worth checking out to sort of inform why we need to actually have some sort of structure in place when we're setting something up like a worker co-op. Another thing to check out would be an essay that was written in the 70s called The Tyranny of Structurelessness by feminist Jo Freeman. And she believed that clear structures and defined authority and democratic accountability is required. So she was involved in sort of feminist collectives where the common wisdom was, well, you know, flat as possible, no hierarchies, no positions. But she believed that the rules and structure should be defined and clear. And as long as the structure of the group is informal, she said, the rules of how decisions are made are known only to a few, an elite, and awareness of power is limited to those who know the rules. So if we're going to build a democratic enterprise, we need to know what the rules are, who's got a position, how that's democratically accountable, how it works. And that tyranny of structurelessness essays is really worth having a look at. So rubber hits the road. How does a co-op actually work in practice? Well, as an entity, it must have a clear purpose in the rules and the constitution, which is set out as primary activities. It has clear member obligations. So there are what are called active membership requirements. And so when you join the co-op, you fulfill those requirements. And if you're no longer fulfilling those requirements, then your membership ceases. 1 member, 1 vote elects a board, minimum 5 members. Or if you're forming a cooperative group, it can be as little as 2 co-ops. The director duties can consider those cooperative principles that I mentioned, those core 7 ones, including democratic economic participation and care for the community. So they're really socially focused from the get-go, and directors, unlike regular companies, most regular companies, can take into account social objectives. Profit surplus is shared according to how much each member owner of the enterprise contributes. When an investment is gathered, it's for improving the quality and services of products and long-term sustainability of the co-op. And, you know, whether a co-op is structured as a not-for-profit or provides for limited distribution of surplus to members, that's the purpose of getting investment. It's not as, you know, an end in itself. So external investors, you can actually have external investors, non-member investors, can't seize control away from the people who have created and benefit from the enterprise, because they're the members and it's 1 member, 1 vote. So you've got these cooperative rules that apply to everyone. You have members in the general meeting. All the members can come together, make the rules, significant decisions, keep the board on its toes, ask the hard questions. And then there's a board of directors that are elected to make business decisions, and it can delegate to subcommittees and individuals, but the board is ultimately accountable. 2 types of co-ops, as I mentioned: a distributing co-op, which can provide limited financial return to members on the basis of their participation; a non-distributing cooperative, where all the surplus goes back in the pot. And non-distributing co-ops are a little bit more socially focused. All co-ops are socially focused though. You know, the distributing co-ops allow for that financial return, and they're more like a socially responsible business. And, you know, depending on the kind of enterprise you want to create, there are pros and cons for either. Cooperative investment. Well, members of a co-op can pay entry fees and subscriptions to help the co-op chug along. Members can buy shares in either a distributing or a non-distributing co-op, and those shares are different from regular share market sort of shares in that they have a fixed price and they're refundable when you leave generally. Debentures, the members can loan, or even external parties can loan to the cooperative. And there are things called cooperative capital units, which are flexible investment. It's a flexible investment vehicle, which can be structured like debt or like equity. I won't get too wonky and spend too much time on that, but look, co-ops are great. They really do allow for community investment, and it's quite underutilized when you compare it to some of the sort of Byzantine structures that regular not-for-profits, for example, set up with social impact bonds and very complicated. Whereas co-ops, you can issue shares to members and just get going. An example is the Monty Hub in Montmorency, a little co-op that decided, just wandering around, came together to buy out an old church rather than see it being bought out by developers. And they raised 2.3 million using community shares and other methods. And they're worth also checking out. There's a little podcast on this podcast called The Cooperative Way. And in that, I interviewed one of the founders, Marissa, who talked about her experience. That was quite sort of early on. Some examples. I've mentioned Evergreen, the Cleveland model in the US, inspired by Mondragon. I mentioned the worker-owned hospital laundry, but they've also got solar power installation, hydroponic greenhouse enterprises. They provide secure employment, co-ownership and profit share for their workforces. And they're also just starting to get into small business buyouts. They work with what's called anchor institutions in their community, so like hospitals or universities that buy the goods and services of these worker co-ops. So I gave the example of the hospital that, did I give the example? I can't remember, but they've got a hospital as an anchor institution, and there's a worker co-op that does all of the laundry services. And rather than a kind of a company like Spotless, where the profits go outside of the community, the profits go back into the community, and the workers enjoy profit share and democratic decision making. They've gotten into sort of community buyouts, and so I really like this clip, and I thought I would show you that so you can check it out as a real life example. Quite an inspiring one, I think.
Welcome back. It's 6:14. Over the past year, many jobs have changed, making many of us rethink our relationship to the work we do.
Yes, but long before the pandemic, Katie, one local company was changing relationships between employers and employees by making everyone an owner.
Oh, I like the sound of that. In this News 5 original, Kevin Berry explains how that move addresses wealth disparity issues.
At Phoenix Coffee in Ohio City,
I'm doing all right. What can we get started for y'all?
the regulars get their drinks through a business that's out of the ordinary.
Just a double's good?
Yep.
Okay.
The barista Keith is one of 13 employee owners because Phoenix Coffee became a co-op right as the pandemic started. President and director of coffee Christopher Ferran says this was in the works for years, but the timing worked out pretty well.
We felt even more strongly that we needed to share with them some of any bounty that existed by forming a cooperative.
Hey guys, what can we get started for you?
Workers like Keith get their normal wages, but they also get a share of the profits at the end of the year that normally just go to a few owners of a small business.
That offers individuals the longer-term opportunity to build wealth.
John McMullen runs Evergreen Cooperative, which helps businesses like Phoenix Coffee transition to the employee ownership model. Evergreen started in 2008, at first creating their own co-ops, hoping to lift up parts of the city that could benefit the most from good-paying local jobs and building wealth. But in the last few years, they found another problem.
What is sometimes referred to as the silver tsunami.
Small business owners were retiring, which could mean closing the business, putting their employees' jobs at risk. That's where Evergreen's Jeanette Webster comes in.
We talk to the seller and we say, you know, you've built up wealth and a legacy here in this community and with your employees. We can facilitate making the investment to you so that your employees can continue this.
She helps the seller convert the business into a co-op, just like Phoenix Coffee did. The move allows employees to keep their jobs and takes the burden of starting a new business off of Evergreen.
We feel like we can, again, accomplish similar goals in a faster, sort of lower risk way, if you will.
Because somebody else already started the business.
It's already started. They already have the proven track record.
It's not right for every company, but it worked for Phoenix Coffee, and that helps Evergreen help more communities faster. It's also an option for small business owners like Marty Berry at Berry's Insulation, so he can secure his company's future.
It's difficult to sell a small business because there aren't a lot of people, and if the owner leaves, sometimes there's a void at the top, and the business is too small for many buyers.
Their conversion to a co-op means employees like Kavya Pavada and Mary Okonowitz got some extra cash last year.
In the beginning, I think it was too good to be true.
But, she says, it's also great for the technicians in the field who see better pay for their trade and now own the trucks and equipment that they work with.
Once we got past that and started learning more about it, I think it's fabulous for the guys.
You're all set.
In Cleveland, I'm Kevin Barry, News 5.
What a good idea for everyone included. Wow, great story, Kevin.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, hopefully I can change slides because I always have a problem with this. Anyway, let's see if it works. It's not working again. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Maybe someone can tell me. I'm going to stop sharing. Then I'm going to share again. It seems to work. Oh. Share. No. Oh. Share again. Start. No, I don't want to go from the start. I'm sorry to do this to you. Okay, here we go. Slide. What moved then? I don't know. So I mentioned Earthworker, homegrown example, was inspired by Mondragon and also Evergreen. And they've got a group of co-ops. One's involved in manufacturing hot water units, environmentally sustainable products in former coal regions. We've got the bread gum co-op, which is a cleaners co-op. It's going from strength to strength, and they're bringing on some new worker members at the moment. Hope Co-op, which is for people, refugees and asylum seekers, and they work with community sector organisations such as the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, Friends of the Earth, and Jesuit Social Services. And just check out Earthworker Co-op; it's really worth having a look at. A international example in New York City is Co-op Ride. They've been set up to take on Uber and Lyft. And because the members are the actual drivers, the profits go back. And so their plan, and they've raised about more than $1 million, quite a bit more than $1 million, $1.5 million there. That they believe that take home after expenses, what the drivers can put in their pockets is $40,000 versus $18,000 if they're with Uber and Lyft. So yeah, quite a compelling member value proposition, as we say in the trade. I am doing this presentation from the Cooperative Causeway in the heart of Melbourne. We're a co-op where either very small socially focused enterprises or individuals can join and govern our own co-working space. And yeah, so it's just another example. And if you're in Melbourne, you might be interested in membership. A little bit of a plug there. It's a non-distributing co-op, and we also run events. We do that podcast I mentioned before, the Cooperative Way, where I interviewed Marissa. So anyway, there it is. There's some examples of other great co-op organisations, including the Business Council of Co-ops and Mutuals. NINA, of course, is a co-op, and Earthworker and others. So check them out. Okay, it's the end of the day. It's about 7 o'clock actually, so I'm a bit croaky. I was a little verging on incoherent there for a while, but I think it was okay. Anyway, I hope that was all right, that you learned something, and of course I can answer questions in the course and all that kind of thing. So have a good day or evening or whatever you're doing. Catch up.